Hello, everybody. My name's Chris Voisey. I'll be your host today. And what we're going to be talking about on today's webinar is how to build a successful FinOps practice. And we want to figure out, where are you in that journey right now, and how do you move forward with it and identify that FinOps journey. And to help me along with that, I've got a couple of guests with me today. Today I've got Ashley Hermatko, sorry, and Venki Perumal. Sorry, I'm screwing it all up as we get started here. But I really appreciate you both joining us today, and I look forward to this discussion. One thing I do want to say is that I do want to encourage some audience participation as we go along, and we will have a question and A period at the end, but I do have a couple of colleagues on the line that can answer questions as we go along as well. So if there's some simple questions, they can answer those. Otherwise, we'll save a few of them so that everybody can actually go and see what's going on, and we can answer those questions together and even launch some questions to Venki and Ashley directly. We'll also have a couple of surveys. I'm going to do a couple of surveys to see how you all measure up to some things that we're going to tell you about, where we have some surveys that the FinOps Foundation has done. And with that, let's turn it over to you, Ashley. Maybe you can introduce yourself a little bit, tell us about your background, and introduce the FinOps Foundation to the audience here.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, so I'm Ashley Hermatko. I am currently the Director of Business Operations at the FinOps Foundation. For those that don't know what the FinOps Foundation is, it is a not-for-profit program that's part of the Linux Foundation. And our whole mission is really around trying to advance the people who are doing cloud financial management. Prior to coming to the FinOps Foundation, I actually worked at Pearson and was the director of FinOps over their global team across multi-cloud, AWS, Azure, and Google as well. So I've had a little bit of background of actually being a practitioner, building a team, running a team, and now I've joined the foundation to help other enterprises scale their practices as well. So just to dive a little further in what FinOps is, it is really the evolving process of cloud financial management discipline and the culture that is required to practice that. It helps enable organizations to get the maximum business value by helping technology, finance, businesses, and other partners to be able to collaborate on data in near real time so that they can make decisions. You can learn a lot more about the FinOps Foundation by going to finops.org. I think you want to go to the next slide. These are some of the outputs that we have, curated in the last 3 years, kind of different supplemental materials that have been really useful for enterprises that are building their team. So we have our principles, which are really our northern stars of how we operate. So we understand that teams need to collaborate. It needs to be a centralized team or practice that is driving things like reservation purchases, rate negotiations. We need to make sure we have reports that are accessible, timely, accurate, that everybody is feeding off of. We want to make sure that the teams at the edge, or the engineering teams, understand that they take ownership for their cloud usage. So we have our principles there. In the middle, you're going to see the different personas. So we've done a lot of research on what are the people that are involved in a FinOps practice, what are their motivations, what are their drivers, what type of KPIs are they interested in. All of this we practice through our domains, which are these 3 key areas of FinOps practice. And then within the domains are capabilities that I'll show you in just a minute. And so as we're walking through these domains like rate optimization, we are doing this kind of cyclical loop of our phases. So we're constantly focusing on informing our audience, making sure things are visible, figuring out how we can optimize the utilization, and then finally operate on making process improvements or automation. So we kind of use that repetitive cycle over and over in all of our domains. And as you see, as we talk through this is an evolving practice, and we realize that people are in different maturity states. And so we represent talking about that with crawl, walk, run very often. And then I think the next thing will kind of show you a little bit. So, what is the framework? So, the framework really consists of these 6 domain areas that are focused on with teams. And then within them, we have 18 different capabilities. So if you go out to the FinOps.org website, you'll be able to dive into each of these capabilities. We explain what it is, what best practices is, what success looks like, what are the KPIs. And we also give real life stories of different organizations that are at those different maturities and how they're accomplishing these different capabilities. So a lot to read out there. We also offer some different courses and training to get FinOps certified that covers this area.
Great. I really appreciate that introduction, and we'll talk a little bit more about the FinOps Foundation some more, and a survey that you recently did and who made up that survey. I think that'll help everybody really appreciate some of that great work that's being done in there. Like I mentioned, we also have Venki on the line here, and Venki is our field CTO. And I wanted to throw over to you, Venki, and see, the FinOps Foundation has really set the bar for where everybody's at and what they need to do. Maybe you can share a few quick words on, how CoreStack adapts this within our own product to apply this.
Absolutely, Chris. First of all, thank you so much. Really pleasure to be pairing up with Ashley on this webinar. One of the key things that CoreStack has done as a platform, we have also evolved, right? Cloud cost management was pretty much looking at reporting was kind of the key requirements at least 3 to 4 years back. But then, with FinOps Foundation coming in and introducing the best practices, and that is exactly what we have been seeing even in the hyperscalers where they have this well-architected framework, which has set of best practices. And similarly in FinOps, we have the best practices that you can pretty much go ahead and implement to make sure that you, in your FinOps journey, you get matured. And that's where, the maturity, how do we go ahead and assess the maturity is something that CoreStack is really working towards. When we have released few reports, we will go through as we continue in this webinar. But the whole idea is, as a platform, we have also kind of gone through the whole change and adopted those 3 key phases. How do we make sure that from an informed perspective, customer clearly knows or the prospect clearly knows what is the cost they are incurring, how can they allocate well? And second is, of course, optimize. So how do we make sure that optimization is not just a one-time activity, but it's more of a continuous activity? That is something which is enabled in the platform, but not just providing recommendations alone, but also able to go ahead and implement those recommendations, which is also one of the key challenges that we have seen in the market. And having it to have an integration with other tools to make sure that it works with other tools as well as part of the remediation. And the third is, of course, how do we continuously assess ourselves for improvement in terms of budgets or tagging and all those stuff.
Great. Thanks, Venki. And, it's interesting as we look at this and we talk about that journey and the process. Everybody has to start and they have to go somewhere in it. So let's talk a little bit about that adoption. I bet everybody here has a bit of their own take on where they are, and we'll take a look at that in just a moment. But let's take a look at those key stages. Ashley, maybe you can walk us through this first.
Yeah, sounds good. So you'll see over on the left-hand side, we've listed a couple of capabilities. Remember, I said we've identified 18 different capabilities. And so within those capabilities, you may be at different stages. And there's a lot of different lenses that you can look at, right? You can look at where you are with understanding knowledge, where you are measuring, where you are with automation. And through those different lenses, you'll kind of be able to figure out where you sit. And so one example I want to give here is forecasting budget granularity. We typically see folks that are in that crawl phase. They're just setting budgets at their enterprise level. And typically we hear them saying, oh, that all of my cloud costs are going to the IT budgets, or IT's paying for cloud right now. And they haven't really gotten past that layer. Then the next phase, when we get into walking, we start to see this evolution where they're starting to break down their spend down to individual teams, potentially individual applications. They're starting to get more proactive and predicting. So maybe they're doing forecasting annually for the first time or semi-annual. And they're starting to raise awareness of where things are not as they expected to the budget materials, especially anything that's really material. When we see organizations getting into the run phase, the responsibility for forecasting is really distributed to the edge and to the engineering teams to contribute to that activity. We also see finance and procurement now feel like they have more visibility and they're being able to aggregate those estimates better and estimate actually, more accurately. We're also starting to see KPIs come out of this. What is your forecast to actuals accuracy? What is the variance? What is that against budget? What is the margin of error that you can expect? A nice thing about the FinOps Foundation is we can provide some of that benchmark data to tell you where other peers are sitting in this capability. Ultimately, what you see as forecasting that's done ends up implementing budget, and the more you do it, the more accurate you get at it. So this is just one example of kind of how we see something like a capability maturing through those different phases.
Great. And, I bet you everybody right now wonders, where they are and may have an early opinion on that. And I know in just a moment, we'll talk about where we've seen the audience out there has responded to where they are in the process. But before we do that, Venki, maybe just a quick words, like where do we see customers that are using CoreStack fall onto here?
So one of the thing is I'll just go one step back, right? Which is essentially when we are in the crawl phase, how do we define from a capability perspective, right? Bare minimum capability, like if we have 16 key capabilities within the FinOps, how do we say that, hey, you know what, first 5 or 6 capabilities will make sure that you are in the crawl phase. And then we can double down and double click and see, hey, within the each capability, can we go ahead and set some sort of parameters which will say you are in a crawl or pre-crawl or run phase, right? So CoreStack has taken that first step to basically look at a higher level that what are the key capabilities today that you have, and then come up with a clear maturity score, right? And the idea is this maturity score is not to say where you are, but it is more about how can you improvise, because every assessments that we do and these phases basically are defined primarily to see how you can improve from one stage to another on a continuous basis, because we know that before it was cost management, but it is no more cost management. It is more of cost governance, right? So you need to have more control, and that is what we have seen in the market as well. And CoreStack pretty much follows the same best practices and how we want to get this culture of FinOps within an organization through a platform.
Absolutely. And I think that's, the key thing is putting this to real work into the real world and implementing it. So let's actually move on and take a quick survey here. And what I'm curious about, if I can get it moving forward, there we go. How mature are you in your FinOps journey? Where are you? Where do you think you are? And let's try to see where we have everybody on the line, where you measure up on this. So maybe if we could throw up the poll here. Let us know if you're in the pre-crawl or none or crawl, walk, run. I'll give you a moment here to respond. All right, let's take a look at what the results show. And here we go. So, wow. Okay, that's actually pretty interesting. I'm not sure if anybody wants to chime in here, but a majority of our participants have not even really begun on this. So I think there's a lot of room in here. But we do have, the second to it, really just over half are in the crawl or walk runs. So I think that's really interesting. Do you guys have any comments on the results that we're seeing right there?
I think see people in the pre-crawl phase, and this is a great place to be to start out with, because you're kind of getting some of that initial knowledge of understanding, what FinOps is and what the framework is. So I think you're already taking the first step to moving to crawl.
Great. Yeah, I totally agree. So let's take a look at what we've identified in through the FinOps Foundation, where people really are. Do you want to throw a little feedback on this, Ashley?
Yeah, so I think, again, the FinOps Foundation, people join as members, free members, and they join our Slack community. And we have a lot of working groups and other organizations where people get involved. And so we have seen a lot of people being able to take their practice from crawl to run, just, with working, engaging with other peers. So probably why we have a little bit more in the run phase here. I think what's also interesting as we did this survey is folks that would identify themselves as run are still in crawl or pre-crawl in some of the capabilities. And so it's really important to note is that doing an assessment like you talked about really helps you identify those gaps and where you go. And so while you may say that you're in, walk or crawl, run, you may be in different spots in those capabilities.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Again, and realistically, if we look at that, that means half of our audience is actually starting to move. A good deal of it are trying to get started, but they're really beginning the process. And you mentioned it, getting into that assessment report. And Venki, maybe you can share a little bit about this. I know we have a FinOps assessment report that we make available to our customers, and even before customers, to give them a sample.
Absolutely, Chris. So one of the outcome that I've seen with the survey that was done, and it clearly says that majority of the way that we assess ourselves is subjective. How do we say that we are in the run phase? How do we say that we are in the crawl phase? Right? To basically convert this whole subjective assumption into more of an objective is essentially what CoreStack is going towards, and that is the first step that we have taken to go ahead and create an automated assessment report, which is the FinOps 360-degree report in CoreStack, right? And this report represents all of those three phases. in the inform, it goes ahead and checks what is your cost, how does your forecast look like, how does your cost trend look like. So as we move to the next step, next slide, you'll clearly see that the report is structured in three key areas. Inform, clearly it tells you what was your spend, where was the bulk of the spend done in which service. So there is also a recommendation that comes into the picture, right? So we do this for one account, which is, of course, it is free. So you can come and choose any one of the accounts where you have large consumption and load your account, and then you get this report in 24 to 48 hours, completely automated. And the next set, which we essentially do, is we also provide you from an optimization perspective, where are the areas that you can go ahead and optimize, what are the recommendations, and of course, in the optimize, as FinOps Foundation suggests, there are only two ways you can go ahead and optimize, right? One, you can do a rate optimization, and the second is you can do a usage-based optimization. Rate is pretty simple because it is more about commit and the discounts that you get from hyperscalers, but it is the usage which needs more intelligence and automation built into it. And that's where CoreStack has a lot of cost-related policies and engines and algorithms which goes against the utilization metrics and provides various recommendations where you can go ahead and optimize cost. I will never say save cost; it is optimization cost, primarily because whatever you save, you basically reinvest on building more application, going more faster to the market. And in the operate phase, we tell you whether you have set the budget, and as Ashley rightly said, in the budget. When you are in the crawl phase, you are pretty much doing budget at an account level or a region level, whatever level, right? But as you move to the walk phase and the run phase, that's where you need to have a system which should allow you to go ahead and set budget at the application owner level, business owner level, cost center level, and then you can track it against the forecast. And even in the one of the survey that was done in the 2022 FinOps survey, we can clearly see how the forecast itself has, people are coming very close to what they forecasted. It was a good insight that I got from the results that were published by the FinOps organization. But yeah, this particular report, it's a free assessment report that we provide in CoreStack. Go ahead, onboard your account, get the report, and for larger assessment, please reach out to our team.
Great. And, the key thing I'm hearing in there is that, first of all, this is free to get started and do the first one and be able to take advantage of. And then you can onboard and start doing more as you work with us. And we can walk you through that journey. And, this is just one part of it. And we're going to get into a little bit more of that State of the FinOps report that is published in just a moment. But getting and informing you of what's happening is really important, as Venki just said, and being able to take those results to optimize and then operate, it's really key. So let's take a look. Let's move along to that State of FinOps report, and this is a really fascinating report that's turned into an annual thing. And I want to talk a little bit about the results and who took this and things like that, but why don't you tell us a little bit about the State of FinOps report before we get started in there?
Yeah, absolutely. So anybody who's kind of in FinOps, we love data, right? And we love it even more in real time. So I will tell you all that you're getting kind of a sneak peek at this because we haven't published this on the website yet. It should be coming soon. If you do go out to the website, you'll see last year's. And basically what we did is we started sending a detailed survey out to our FinOps practitioners to really learn from them and collect responses from them. And then we've been starting to slice and dice that data by different regions, by different industries, by different crawl, walk, run. And that's what we're here to kind of report on you today. The idea behind the survey is it will allow us to know what areas that we need to develop more best practices around. It's a really great resourcing to our partners and our vendors on where they need to focus on development. And then the other part is it's really amazing benchmarking data that people can take back to the organization. I'll give an example. When I had saw spot coverage in most companies was 20%, I instantly ran back to my CIO at Pearson and said, we need to focus on spot, right? And so that's the idea behind it. It can help you launch conversations with your executive team as well. So if we dive into it a little bit, if we dive into a little bit more at the survey, so over 1,000 practitioners took the survey. I'll jump to the next slide here. It had 65 questions, and there was about $40 billion of total spend among the individuals that took this. And you kind of see the breakdown on what they were averaging per year in their cloud providers.
So the other side, let's take a look at where these folks came from, what industries.
Yeah, so what's really fascinating about this is obviously we see our financial services are leading. They're probably the majority right now that are heavily focused on their FinOps practices and putting it in practice. Makes sense. Typically, people in financial services are well in tune with their own finances. So the fact that they're putting a hyper focus on this, and then the other thing that was really interesting is the fact that FinOps isn't just segregated to one industry. If you see the orange over there on the left, we've pivoted it so you can see the different industries. So automotive is focusing on this, energy, healthcare. We've got retail that are focusing on FinOps. And so I think that's what's interesting is like no individuals in this alone. You have a community that is also doing this across different industries.
Great. And, I as I look at this, my initial reaction is it represents very similar to what the CoreStack customer breakdown looks like. And Venki, you work with a lot of these. What's your thought there?
It actually represents the right level of data. In fact, all of the conversations that we have had with any of our prospective customers or partners, we have clearly seen that financial services industry is adopting in a way, and primarily because I think they are also pretty much far ahead in the cloud adoption journey as well. That clearly says that their consumption is high. Everybody is in the range of 5 million and above. So clearly that practice is very, very important to have the control over the cost. So they started pretty early. Because they started early, they need to have this FinOps under control as well. So clearly this represents the conversations that I have had with all the CIOs in the financial services industry. And clearly the next stage is, of course, I've also spoken to retail, which has a huge cloud consumption, right? So everything depends upon how fast you are going or adopting cloud and how your consumption increases. That's where all of these best practices really helps you streamline in the way that you manage your cost. So it's pretty good data, and certainly it aligns with what the conversation that I've been having.
I agree. It's kind of funny. A couple of years ago, we used to say, every company is pretty much a software company. Now I think we need to say every company is a software and FinOps company because that's the reality of this and trying to make this accountable. So then, typically this conversation goes on to so what's blocking us? What's stopping us from moving forward? And let's take a look at that. And let's do another quick poll here. What's your top pain point really getting started in working with FinOps? And I know it's hard to pick one of these. So I'll give everybody a moment to read through. But we're just going to pick on the first one, and then we'll look at where the audience from the FinOps Foundation has found the results in here. So let's give you another moment to read. I know there's quite a bit there. All right, let's see how we're doing. Let's see the results there. Yeah, wow. This is, we're going to see some fascinating commentary, I think, on this. Getting engineers to take action is right up top. Accurate forecasting of spend in organizations' adoption of FinOps. So I laugh, and you're going to all see why in just a moment. Let's take a look at what we found at the FinOps Foundation found here. Maybe Ashley, do you want to speak a little bit to this one?
Yeah, I mean, the results on the poll that you just did here were very similar to that. Maybe we too much strategically ordered them that way, but no, as you will see, getting engineers continues to be a difficult challenge. That's where we keep talking about the fact that, we've had this big transition on how software is procured, right? It's not the traditional data centers where you go buy a rack and then the IT pays for it. It's now you could hire an engineer out of college tomorrow that ramps up a server that costs thousands of dollars, right? And so we really need to be focusing on, getting them to take action and preventing the waste occurring up front anyways. And so, that's been a clear one that's been out there. Part of the FinOps Foundation, we've had a working group that spun up a whole white paper on how to take action. We're revising the book to have another chapter about this. And so it's great to see this in a place we can focus on. I think the other one that's, really interesting is enabling automation. We've seen that kind of move up year over year. I think as you see more companies that are moving towards the running phase, they realize to be able to scale, they have to focus on automation. So I think that's a great one to see. How about you, Venki?
Yes, the number one, you're absolutely right. Getting engineers to take action, that is something which we have seen in every organization. And primarily because there are multiple ways to look at the data itself, right? So for example, if you have a $10,000 worth of cost optimization, but when you split that into different business units or different teams, the kind of savings that you do is hardly, $1,000. Does it really make sense to put effort to go ahead and save? That is one, which is probably stopping them from going ahead and implementing those changes, right? That's number one. Number two is, of course, automation. If there is no automation, you have to go and do a lot of manual work, but you have other priorities. So clearly you don't treat this as a priority, and that's number two. Number three, there is a lot, you also have a long change management process within an organization, which can probably stop you from going ahead and making those changes. And this is, we have seen, and where the enterprises are also moving is, how do we address this particular challenges? Can we go ahead and create a workflow wherein, if you're not taking an action, why are you not taking an action? Is it business reason? Is it technical reason? Why are we not doing it, right? I think that is the outcome that we really want to derive. And that is what we are also trying to build within CoreStack, wherein for every optimization recommendation that we provide, we want to go ahead and capture that data, because that data is essentially what is going to help us improvise or address this particular pain point or challenge. Rest of the ones are pretty much, in alignment. But I'm really surprised to see the shared cost has gone down from a chargeback perspective this year. I think that also depends on the fact that the people who took the survey are on the various stages of maturity within the FinOps itself, right? So for someone who is in the pre-crawl phase, shared cost doesn't mean anything to them. But for someone who is in the walk and run phase, probably for them, the shared cost will probably be number two in the whole challenge. But yeah, this represents the reality, what we are seeing in the field.
Right. And, I think that's, representative of the customers is a key thing to be looking and talking about here. I always get a kick out of the first thing holding us back is the own engineering. It's the people is holding us back from the automation itself, which is always interesting. But getting that accurate forecasting, I know I've talked to so many customers, and we're used to the old school days, if you will, where we had physical boxes and we'd allocate them to projects, to processes, to things that are going on, and being able to actually go and turn this into where the actual spend is and forecasting of that, that's been a pain point, which is, tools like CoreStack is really helping to overcome. So let's take a look. Let's go and now map this back. We talked about the pre-crawl, crawl, walk, and run phase before, and we'll just get our next slide on here. There's a wide range of these challenges during this journey. Ashley, maybe again, let's maybe start with you on this.
Yeah, it's good, I think, here to look at the two extremes, so the pre-crawl and the run. So, in the pre-crawl, you've got organizational adoption, aligning teams. You're really hyper-focused on that cultural element, right? And that's where having kind of an executive sponsorship that, believes in your FinOps team and advocates for your team and can get you resources is really important here. On the other end, you see on the run, accurate forecasting isn't listed there because they've already tackled that challenge. Typically, they've already tackled the challenge of getting the organization to adopt FinOps and aligning teams around it. So you typically see those fall off. But in the run phase, we're still concerned about reducing waste, which I think is interesting. And that ties very close to getting engineers to take action, right? So that's just to let you know that the problem doesn't necessarily go away the further you get, but you have to use different tools and techniques to alleviate that pain point. And then the other one we start seeing in the run really pick up is the enabling automation. And I think that has to do with the fact that you're now trying to scale, or maybe you're trying to cover FinOps, across multiple clouds. And that just becomes even more important to have those governance rails in place and automation to take care of things.
Great. And Venki, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is exactly what I was talking in the previous slide, right? It means one challenge means different for different people, right? On different stages. So clearly what phase they're saying getting engineers to take action. And clearly in the challenges also, it came to the very first. But again, does it really mean that run will have the same challenge? They may be, but the priority is more on reducing the waste, right? And this is the reason why every enterprise needs to have the maturity assessment done on a regular basis to see where they are, what is important to you, and then clearly build in that whole culture of financial accountability, have sponsorship, because that's very, very important, right? Clearly, when we are in the pre-crawl phase, how do we make sure that we get that sponsorship of getting, implementing FinOps in the organization is very key. And then you move on a regular basis, assess yourself on a regular basis to make sure that all of these challenges does not persist, right? So that's the whole idea of the whole maturity itself.
Absolutely. And yeah, and I think a key thing you said there is that this has to be done on a regular basis, right? And people have to have this available, and that's where things like our dashboards and things like that really do help. So you're starting to see things in real time, and you're taking the steps to mitigate it along the path instead of waiting until major points later on in milestones. So we have one more slide and one more survey that we saw here that we wanted to go through. And this is, again, just a fraction of what the FinOps Foundation did in their report. So I do want to point people back there. But let's talk a little bit about, is FinOps a priority for executives at your organization? Again, let's go start with Ashley here. And Venki, if you want to chime in a little bit about relating this to our customers. Ashley, go ahead.
Yeah, so oftentimes people will ask, where does your FinOps practice sit? We've seen where it's a dedicated team or it's a hub and spoke model, and it typically will sit with the CFO, CIO, or CTO. So seeing those as the top three here and seeing them, that is a priority, that kind of makes sense. We do see that wherever the panic around cloud spend happens is typically where we see FinOps emerging and where we see it becoming a priority. So if it is your finance, your CFO that is concerned about the cloud spend, that might be where the FinOps team gets configured or set up. More commonly, we see it within the CIO, CTO, so they can be a little bit more closer to the engineering team. So the other one I think that's interesting is the director level engineers up here. About 50% know what FinOps is and that it's a priority. So before we had talked about how we need to get engineers to take action, but we're also saying that the engineering directors are aware. So how do we get that down to the individuals? I think that's key. One that surprises me is the chief product officer. I talked about FinOps is about maximizing business value. I would think out of the chief product owner, understanding your return on investment in the cloud would be super important. So I hope that's an area that we focus on and create maybe some more persona-based training this next year for.
Yeah. And Chris, in this part, I think this is where how do we make the data visible to the right persona within an organization to basically tell them why is it priority, why FinOps needs to be priority when you are in the cloud ops journey, right? Or FinOps journey in the cloud space. A step towards that is, all these data that we get from the system, from hyperscaler, from a consumption perspective, how can we make it so meaningful for a CTO, for a CIO, for a CFO, or for a director level within the organization? And one of the key things that in CoreStack, what we are doing is we are building what we call as persona-based dashboard. So a CIO will have their own dashboard. They can just go create their own way of data that they want to see. Because once the data is visible, they clearly know what is in control, what is not in control, and then becomes a priority. Until a time where they don't realize, because if you don't represent the data right, then they don't even know how important this is. And suddenly you see that, hey, my cloud cost was 100,000. All of a sudden, it has gone to $250,000 within a month. So once we and that's where data is very, very important. There's a lot of data that we generate as part of the consumption itself, and cost being one of the very key aspect to it. If we represent that well, in the view that we want to give it to individual persona, I think this graph will change next year for sure.
I definitely agree there, and I see Ashley nodding her head as well, and I think it's going to evolve. And I go back to the, every organization is a FinOps organization. They need to be paying attention to this, and I think the phases, it's not, it's going to be clearer and clearer where you are on here and progressing through this. So let's take a look. See if we have any questions from the audience here. And I'm trying to get my mouse over. Give me a moment. There we go. Let's see. We had a couple of questions that were sent along. Some may have come in beforehand. Maybe the first one for Ashley. The FinOps maturity, as you spoke, it has these 3 phases: crawl, walk, and run. What are your thoughts and recommendations on resources organizations need to make this journey easier? Maybe what tools, manpower, expertise, alignment to the ecosystem, etc.?
Yeah, I can answer that. So I say, number one resource is executive sponsorship. You need someone that, buys into this and that the fact that this is needed in the organization. Once you have that sponsorship, you're typically looking at building some type of practice. Now, before you even build a practice, you may want to work with a consultant. You may want to work with, someone that's an expertise. You may want to go hire subject matter experts in this area to get you started. What we often see within organizations, we have something called a FinOps driver. So it's someone within an organization that is very passionate about this and wants to build a team or build a practice from the ground up. And then they typically will borrow resources until they can be full time. We've seen resources borrowed from like engineering, BI development teams, program managers, things like that kind of come together. This can also sit within your cloud center of excellence as well. I think once you've kind of established your team and you've got your executive sponsorship, doing a type of assessment where you can figure out where your gaps are is really important. And then you're probably going to look for some third-party tooling to start with that you can leverage that helps get that visibility out to stakeholders pretty quickly so that you can start rolling out your easy wins and taking actions on those things as well. So kind of the order I would go with at least.
Okay. And next question. Did you have anything you wanted to add there, Venki, or I thought
No,
that
no.
was
I think it's a combination of people, process, and tool, right?
Yep.
So we always talk about principles of, and I think FinOps is also there is no even for because it's more of a cultural change that you're bringing in. It is important to have the people bought in. You need to have the right tool sets. And I've seen, there are enterprises who have built their own set of tools as well. But I think it is important to see how can you scale that because data changes and how much of an effort do you want to put it in-house versus what do you want to get it from a third-party tool. So all those things are very, very important in the overall journey. You have to make sure that the FinOps maturity reaches.
Great. And I have another question for you, Venki, that looks like it's right up your alley. Is you mentioned about the FinOps assessment here. Are there any other assessments available, or are you planning to do anything such as a comprehensive cloud maturity index, maybe involving FinOps, SecOps, CloudOps, as we would call them?
Sure. So yes, in the journey of assessment, the FinOps is the first one that we took because clearly there is a lot of customers are talking about FinOps, where they are. How do we make sure that what are the gaps that I can fill? And that's what the FinOps 360-degree report does. But that's the first version of the report. That report is also going to get enhanced because there are some manual process also that the organization take through. So we also want to make sure that we record that and also take the automated assessment data that comes from the engine, from CoreStack engine, club it together and provide the right score, right? So the version 2 of the report will have all those things also taken into consideration. But that being said, after FinOps, we will be also doing a SecOps as well as CloudOps. At the end, the whole idea is how do we make sure that we provide you a quantifiable data with respect to maturity from an overall cloud adoption perspective itself. Because in cloud, we cannot look at just cost alone, because even in the FinOps, if you look at it, the impact of provisioning, you will see it in the cost. There's the impact of security, you will see it in the cost. Because sometimes if it is, someone goes ahead and hacks your account and goes ahead and does bit mining, coining, you know that there's going to be an impact on the cost. And that's where the cost anomaly, all those things comes to the picture. And CoreStack looks everything together. And that's the reason the final goal is to build what we call as a cloud maturity model or cloud maturity index.
Great. Thank you. I got actually another great one just came in, and from Sean here that appreciates the time to present the info, and the concept of FinOps is new at his organization, and they're just getting started into the cloud migration, whereby FinOps becomes more relevant in that, of course, right? We've related capabilities, or they have, as it relates to traditional data center cost management, which is what I was bringing up before. With that said, he's at a stage where he wants to learn what FinOps is about, and at a high level, maybe a playbook on establishing a FinOps operating model. Is there any directions we can help point in that to help get a fundamental understanding, and what recommendations would you have for somebody that wants to report there?
Yeah, so there's if you haven't joined the FinOps Foundation already, I would. Like I said, it's free to all practitioners. Once you get in it, you get into our Slack community, and there are a lot of white papers that are started there. I'm right now running four working groups. We're diving into forecasting, we're diving into automation, unit economics, and so those are places that you can join and contribute to. And then when the deliverables are done, we post them open source onto our website. So that's a great place for you to get going. If you haven't read the FinOps Foundation book, it's a great baseline as well. And then just being a part of the community and being able to ask, other members questions. People are super friendly. If you get stuck on a problem, we have an ask a question channel. So that's kind of where I'd point you to get started.
Yeah. And that's where those resources are great with the FinOps Foundation. And we'll be sure we follow up on the webinar with the link, of course, to Ashley and the FinOps Foundation that you can click through and go to there as well. And one more quick comment I see here, maybe for Venki. Are those CoreStack dashboards extending to other metrics and views not FinOps related? SLIs, SLAs, SLOs?
True. Yes. So the idea of widget-based dashboard itself is providing data in various forms for various teams. So for FinOps, what they want to see may not be the ones that a CloudOps team will probably look for or a security team will look for. But for a director level or for a VP level, they will require cost data, they'll require security data, they'll require the operations data together. So yes, so we will be, the whole platform will have an ability wherein you can create your own SLA dashboard, SLO dashboard, by just going ahead and adding widgets. So these are all widgets. So the idea is to build the comprehensive list of widgets for FinOps, SecOps, and CloudOps together, so that now you have an ability to go ahead and design your own dashboard. And that happens within seconds.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So, I think these have been some great questions. If you have others, please feel free. You can continue on there and we can follow up directly afterwards. And follow along. We'll have more of these webinars coming, and we'll have some more spot topics on them that are really guided by you, what you're all looking for. So, this is a really relevant topic, especially getting the preview of that FinOps report for 2022 ahead of it being published. I know also on the FinOps Foundation on the YouTube channel as well, the audience here and the folks online can actually go and watch a couple of the topics already. I think there's been 2 so far shared where you've gone through some of those results. So, that's there. Yep.
There's someone who wants to have a final question.
Do we have one other? Oh, we do have one. Okay, sure. We can quickly do this. Let's see, Karen. I am surprised to see the team alignment as low as it is on that poll. It's clear how essential executive sponsorship and alignment between organization leaders is for a successful FinOps implementation. What is the number one suggestion you can make to an organization's FinOps project manager to ensure key decision makers are taking FinOps seriously? That's a really good point. And that they're open-minded about the scope that's involved, especially for those older, slower to change businesses. And I think that's a spot-on question. That's a great one. I'll let both of you chime in here a little bit.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Anybody has little kids, sometimes you got to talk to them a couple times about things, right? And sometimes you have to do the same thing with managers. And so, my biggest thing is getting on regular cadences. So you should be able to put together as the FinOps project manager, what is the scope of cost? And here's where the budget is, and you're over, or we've seen this anomaly alerts in your account this month, or, hey, we're wondering what you're doing next, right? Like sometimes you just need to push those conversations and make sure they're scheduled and frequently, and you're providing the data that they need to review. You're not making any assumptions about the data. You let them bring that to you as well. You don't want to march into there and say, like, I just pulled up my tool and says you can save $500,000. Why aren't you doing that? That's not the appropriate conversation. It's sitting together to work through where they're at in their journey, what they're focused on, what their priorities are. So sometimes it's just pushing the conversations. And I also say this one thing, which is like, whenever you're doing FinOps, you're going to have people that are your champions, you're going to have your critics, and you have your challengers, right? And so your champions, spend time with them. They're gonna boost you up on your rough days, right? People that are challenging you, those are great people to work with because you can figure out how to create your services that are gonna, they're questioning what you're doing and you can get feedback from them. People that are your critics, just you don't need to spend time with them, right? They will eventually come around to what FinOps is and what FinOps is doing for the organization. So really focus with your champions and your challengers and trying to make the best services possible.
Absolutely. And, one thing I would say, and Venki, I don't know if you want to add a little bit to what I'm going to go on here, but it's, bring in subject matter experts, right? And you may be it, and you may be evolving into that position yourself, but that's why we're all here too, right? Whether you turn into with the FinOps Foundation or their extended group, or you work with folks like us at CoreStack, where that's what we're going to do. We're going to actually help you bring this and present it and actually help you change that opinion and direction. And we're going to give you evidence, right? We're going to try to find customers that are very similar to yours that we've interfaced with, that we've done this for, and try to represent that so that you'll be able to see it. And I know, Venki, you do this all the time, and I see it with the customer success role because I see these customers that they're rolling out. This is just something we can easily help you with there as well.
Yes, and that's where I always go with data, right? Because the moment you go and say, hey, tell me whether it is important, the next question is show me why it is important, right? So if you're able to represent the key data, which is going to help improvise your whole process, your whole business outcome, then people will listen to it, right? If I'm going to present a report which clearly says, hey, these are the areas where you're spending, for tagging, we are about 5 people spending hundreds of hours just to fix tagging. Wherein if you use a tool or if you build automation, I can bring that down to whatever hours, and the rest of the hours I can go ahead and work on improvement, right? So these are the things which actually can be derived through the data. So once we have the data represent well, I think then people will understand, okay, why is it important for me to go ahead and implement all these best practices that FinOps suggests. So it's data.
Absolutely. Again, finding that data is that problem, and we'll help you there. Absolutely. So reach out, and and great transition on that point is I'm gonna again, feel free to launch any other questions. You can contact us here at CoreStack, but you have the ability to get this FinOps assessment risk free, no cost, no obligation. Take a look at your first account, try to go in there and see, and that will help you get that data, as Venki was saying, to bring it forward and start to work with it. Any final parting words from both of you before we go? Ashley, maybe?
I think there's just a lot of resources out there. Again, just emphasize checking out FinOps.org. And if you're at a point where you'd like to get yourself, certified, that's a great way to help advance your career as well. So.
Oh, absolutely. And it's been fascinating watching. You've got a couple of those top level certifications that have happened with some folks that I've seen the announcements. Congratulations to them. And, it's a great program. Venki, anything final words before we shut this down?
Yep. All I would say is track your adoption, right? Track your adoption, have these best practices before it goes out of control. And that is the reason why FinOps as a foundation itself, it was set to basically have this list of best practices and how you can implement it. And all these data are essentially giving you the right level of input to say, hey, can I go ahead in this right direction to go ahead and fix all the issues that I have? So be it pre-crawl, crawl, or walk or run phase, I think it is important for us to understand what is missing and clearly continue to assess yourself the whole journey.
Great. Again, thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Venki. It's been a pleasure today. I appreciate everybody that's been online. We had quite an audience and some amazing questions out there. Reach out to us. You can sign up at corestack.io/assessment. And otherwise, we're here to answer anything. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.